July 3rd, 2002. My name is George Gardner. We are about to record an oral history with attorney George Fowler at his home in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. George has given us permission to make this recording. This interview is part of a series of oral history interviews being conducted by Carolyn Osborn for the benefit of researchers who visit the Hamilton Library of the Cumberland County Historical Society. The objective is to record as accurately as possible, through the memories of residents who have been active in the community, a history of the times during which they have participated in those activities. We welcome George and thank you for agreeing to participate in our series. I will now turn the session over to Carolyn, who will begin the interview with you.
George, it's a pleasure for us to meet with you today, and we look forward to having a lot of happy memories that we can record. And I'd like to begin, if I may, about your earliest memories as a young child here in Carlisle and stories about your family. Where did you live in Carlisle?
My earliest recollection was 260 South College Street. And my parents bought that home when I was just a couple years old, I guess. And my earliest recollections of Carlisle actually were not of the city itself, but as of that home. And in fact, not only of that home, but in a crib in that home, a regular baby's crib. And I remember one visit I had with my aunt from Mechanicsburg. She was a sister-in-law of my mother. And that's the earliest I could come up with.
And what was your mother's maiden name? Do you recall?
Yes, Schroeder, German, Schroeder.
And was she born in Carlisle too, or did she move here with her family or her husband?
She moved here with my father and an older brother at that time. And she was born in Mechanicsburg.
Your father?
No, her father.
Her father. And was your father born in Carlisle?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember your grandparents?
You bet. He was superintendent of the Borough Water Company, I believe.
Oh, was he?
At the time of his death.
And your grandmother and grandfather lived right here in Carlisle?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember, what were the happiest memories of your childhood living on South College in such a lovely home? And playmates, friends that you knew in the neighborhood? Do you recall school chums who are still here?
That I can remember, I knew children my age roughly, of course, but I can't remember any details about them.
And what schools did you go to?
I went to the Franklin building for grades 1, 2, 3, and then up to the what has been torn down now, the Lambert, not the Lambert building, the other building used to be on the high school lot. What was your question? Sorry.
The schools that you went grades 1 through 3.
Yeah.
And then
grade 4 was up at the not the Lambert building, it was the other building up there.
Wilson?
No. I forget what they call that.
Well, we'll come back.
On the same plot as the Lambert building.
Okay. And then did you go to high school here?
Yes, ma'am. Up through grade school, up through high school, right?
And then where did you go to college?
Georgetown University in Washington.
Yes, you did. That's wonderful. All 4 years?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you went on to law school?
Yes, ma'am.
At Georgetown, or did you go to another?
Went to law school here
At Dickinson?
at Dickinson.
What graduating class were you?
I graduated in the year 1943.
And then when did you meet Elaine?
When did what?
When did you meet Elaine?
Oh, so I'd say about 1938, 39, somewhere in that neighborhood.
And was she from Carlisle?
No, ma'am, she was from Philadelphia, actually.
And did you meet at law school or before that?
Actually, met her in the hospital. My grandmother was in the hospital, and I went to visit her, and she said, "Boy, pick up that book. You take that down to that lovely young lady 3 doors down on the left," or something like that.
Oh,
And Elaine was a patient there at the same time. She'd fallen off a horse, and I just always remember meeting her that way.
Isn't that that's a wonderful meeting. And how long before you were married?
Oh, well, that meeting took place, what did I say, 1938 maybe or something. We were married in 1945 in Honolulu, Hawaii.
At the end of the war?
No, during the war. The war was still going on. She was able to get a job and come over, work for the government.
And were you in the service at the time?
I was in the service. I was with the Adjutant General's Department.
Because you had graduated from law school by then.
Yes, ma'am.
And so how long were you in Hawaii?
Let me see. I went there in 19... Oh. I forget the year. 1940, I believe it was. And then we lived together there about a year or so, and then we came back after the war was over.
And came to Carlisle?
Turned to Carlisle.
And so then we go on, we have your schools now, and you're getting married. And where did you first live with Elaine? What was your first address in Carlisle after you came back?
Oh, let me think. It was an apartment we rented, but I can't remember the actual address. If I do, I'll tell you later.
And the children, you went on to have your family. And where did you establish your first law practice?
Here in Carlisle.
And were you alone, or did you join a group of attorneys?
No, I was with my brother, actually. And my father, but my father wasn't with us long because he died. So my brother and I practiced together for a while.
And what was the name of the company?
Just Fowler and Fowler.
And then now, is it your son who is an attorney now?
Yes, ma'am.
You're here in Carlisle, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he join the company?
No. I had graduated from law school, practiced for 40 years, and I was ready to retire. And he didn't want to hold me back. He just said, "Go ahead and retire. I'll get something else." So that was the end of the firm as such.
I see. And then how long did you only practiced here for a few years?
40.
40.
42 or something like that.
And then your son created his own office, his own business?
No, he joined Bill Martson's firm. And it's now Martson, Deerdorf, Williams, and Otto.
Yes. And how many children did you and Elaine have?
8.
And where, can you tell us where they are now? They were all born in Carlisle, correct?
Yes, they were all born in Carlisle. I could pretty well tell you. The oldest one, Nancy, is a nurse, and she was in Vermont. She retired and came here to take care of us in our aging process. She's a good nurse and a good companion. Our second oldest is Mary Elizabeth. She's married to a gentleman named Duxbury, an Englisher who's very knowledgeable on the electronics. 3 is David, a boy. He is a very good motorcycle repairman and works for Honda down the Harrisburg Pike. 4th child is Teresa. She has a very responsible job. She is, let me think, director or something like that of employee relations of the entire Customs Department of the United States.
Where is she? Where does she live?
She lives in a town right near Washington, D.C., right off the Beltway. Then the next one is a girl, Helen, married with 2 young children. She lives in Minneapolis. The next one should be about 6. Constantine. He lives in Amesville, Ohio, and right now he's got some kind of a coffee wholesale business going on. George was followed him, and the baby was Michael.
And what does Michael do?
Michael he was a driver of a concrete mixing truck until a retina, detached retina in one eye, and he's not allowed to drive truck anymore. So he still works for the concrete company. He is in charge of mixing the loads in the morning. Like 4 o'clock, I think he reports in.
And then how many of your children do you have here in Carlisle with you?
David. George and Michael. Con's the only one that's not in Carlisle. Constantine.
Is Constantine a family name?
That was my grandfather's name.
His first name?
First name.
It's a wonderful name. You don't hear it very often.
That's true. I like it.
And did your grandfather Constantine live here in Carlisle?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Born here. His father came to the United States from Germany in something like 1840 or some such date.
You have a big family, George. It must be a great joy.
It is. It is a good family. Big.
Big, but that's wonderful. And
Yep.
to have as many of them here is even better. It's really grand.
I think so.
What?
I'm not sure Elaine's not so all the time, but
In all the years that you've been here, and I know you practiced as an attorney for many years, what were your other memberships in societies here in Carlisle? Would it have been the Historical Society and some of the other groups? Do you recall?
I did not get mixed in with the Historical Society until maybe 10 years ago. Then I joined, and I'm active now as a volunteer. Anything else I can add to that?
Were you volunteered in any other volunteer groups here in Carlisle? I mean, there's the Rotary and Red Cross and United Way.
Well, I think I was president of the United Way one year, and I was on Borough Council for 2 years or 4, I forget which it was, term.
You and Elaine have you were very busy raising a family, too.
Oh, I'll say.
Yes, yes. Looking back on how Carlisle has still remained a charming, small city, what are your fondest and earliest remembrances of Carlisle as the borough, as a small town?
What do I find?
Well, as growing up here, what are the things you remember most? Would it be the train station, the fire stations, the old market, the farmer's market?
Oh, I can remember all of that yet. They were very vivid at the time.
What is one of your favorite ones? Like the train coming through, or?
Yep.
And then the market was very close to the train station. Train station was on West High and North Pitt, right?
And the market was on actually West High.
Yes, yeah, on the corner up there at the square. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what else? Do you remember the old courthouse, of course?
Oh, sure, you bet.
I imagine you spent quite a bit of time.
Oh, yeah, that's where my brother was killed.
Oh, was he?
He was, yes. He was assassinated in the courtroom.
Tell us more. I've never heard that.
This was at a time when if an attorney came in from another county to try a case or an appearance court, he had to do it with a Cumberland County attorney associated with him. This particular case involved an older man who had left Cumberland County going to Florida or not, or Las Vegas or someplace like that, and got a divorce in that state. Under Pennsylvania law, it was not a good divorce. But he took it into court to try to get support on it, and he fought it, and the judge ruled finally, yes, he had to pay $50 a month or something like that support, even though he thought he had been divorced. He actually hadn't been divorced according to Pennsylvania law. And with the judge handing down the ruling verbally, this client pulled out a pistol from his pocket. He'd sewn a pocket on the inside of his shirt. Pulled out a pistol. 4 shots, 4 people. My brother was killed. The judge was wounded. The man's wife was wounded, and the attorney who sat in with the guy from the other county was wounded.
When was this, George?
1955.
Oh my! What happened to the criminal?
Oh, he was tried and convicted, went to prison, died in prison.
So his wife never got the $50?
Oh. Of course, it was a big pile to do that.
Oh, I can imagine. That's a wonderful story I'd not heard. And that all happened in the old courthouse?
That happened in the old courthouse, yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Do you have?
I remember I was sitting at home eating lunch at the time. Phone rang. It was Ed Blumenthal, who was also an attorney. He said, "George, John's been shot." I said, "What?" He said, "John has been shot in the courthouse. He's been taken to the hospital." So I went up to the hospital as quickly as I could, and he was in the emergency room, and he just slowly was going away. He had a bullet right there in the middle of his chest. Just couldn't stop the blood.
Do you remember who the judge was at the time?
Yes, Judge Mark Garber. And he had a slug somewhere, one of his shoulders. He pretty well crippled up that arm for the rest of his life.
Well, the judge, was it at that time, was it a circuit judge?
Was it what?
A circuit judge who traveled from one part of the county to the other to hear cases?
Circuit judge? Oh, no.
No.
No, he was a regular elected judge for Cumberland County. He was our second judge after Sugar.
Oh,
Now we have 5, of course.
oh, that's quite a story. I had not heard that. Had you, George?
Yes.
Oh, it was all over the country in the papers.
I did not live here at the time, but I had heard the story before, yes. And your brother's name was John.
John D. Fowler Jr.
Named for your father.
And for my dad, right?
And Constantine was named for his grandfather. What was your mother's first name, June?
Helen. Helen Irving. Named Irving because she went to, oh no, I don't know how she got it, but she went to Irving College.
Irving College in Mechanicsburg.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that where she got the name?
I don't think so. I don't think the family had any particular connection with Irving College when my mother was born. But she got the name Irving. I don't know how.
Was the Irving College at the time for women, was that 2 years or was it 4?
I have no idea for sure.
I don't know. Well, that was a wonderful story, and I wanted to go on now. If you can tell me about how you've noticed the changes in the borough of Carlisle. I think we remember some of the earliest ones are of the mom and pop stores, local family businesses. Which are your earliest memories of downtown businesses? Like Bowman's?
Bowman's, yes, I have early recollection. And Mr. Watson, who ran the place.
Ah, and how did you know Mr. Watson?
Huh?
How did you know Mr. Watson?
Seeing him going into the store and buying something or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of the other town business people and attorneys that you remember?
Well, one of the very colorful ones was Joseph McKeon. He was a member of the faculty at the law school, and he was just kind of a great person, great sense of humor. Dean Hitchner, of course.
And did many of them practice here too?
Pardon?
Did some of them not only teach at the law school, did they have practices here? Did they have law practices here too?
Yes, not too big, but they did practice some.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember anyone else in the law school that stands out? I mean, there was Judge Schubert and...
Beg pardon?
Do you remember other law professors who you particularly liked or enjoyed?
Oh, you bet. Eugene Reeder was one. He was great. The dean of the law school was a pretty good professor. That was, can't think of his name.
We'll come back to that. How many students attended the law school each year when you were going to the law school?
Oh, maybe a couple hundred at the most.
Mm-hmm. And 4 years?
Just that. Huh?
Was it 2 or 4 years?
3.
3.
The law school was 3 years.
And then you went right out into your own practice with your brother.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And where did you and Elaine first live when you had your law practice?
Beg pardon?
Where was it you and Elaine lived when you were raising your family and starting your practice?
Well, let me see. I think the first place we lived when we got back to Carlisle was out on North Street, near that Park Street.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to someplace more downtown and moved around a few different places.
I guess each one was bigger with your growing family.
Pardon?
Was each house bigger when you had such a growing family?
Yeah, we needed it. As family get bigger, we need a bigger place to live.
And 260 South College, who was the original owner of that house? Do you recall? Did your father build it?
No, he did not build it. He bought it from the gentleman who was president of the, I think it was Carlisle Trust Company. I can't remember his name.
Do you remember, was that on the corner of South College and Walnut?
South College
and Walnut.
And Walnut.
Where General Steele lived for a while?
Oh, yeah.
Is that,
that was right next door to us.
Right next door. That's a lovely street to live on, isn't it? Beautiful, beautiful.
Still very lovely.
Isn't it? With trees and, yes. What do you remember the old hotels in Carlisle?
Well, not much, because I didn't stay at the hotels very much. I remember the...
But you went for Sunday dinners, didn't you, occasionally?
Very seldom. But I can remember the Argonne Hotel was what later became the James Wilson. It was at the corner where right at the corner of High and Pitt Street. And let me see, the Molly Pitcher was quite the hotel for a while.
Yes. Till
it went downhill. And I think that's the only two I can remember.
Well, I remember a lot of people always went out for Sunday dinner, especially to what was now the Molly Pitcher. Do you remember stories about Molly Pitcher and stories of the old cemetery?
I don't remember any particular story, but other than that's where Molly was buried.
And what about Bessie? You said you never knew her, but you'd heard stories about her.
Well, I heard of Bessie, but I don't really ever recall seeing her more than a couple of times on the streets. I'm damn sure I was never a customer.
And what are the things you recall in the last few years that you've noticed changing so much in Carlisle? How much has Carlisle changed, but how much has it stayed the same?
I think it has stayed more the same than it has changed.
Except for trucks.
Hmm?
Except for trucks.
Except for?
For the trucking industry, all the big trucks all the time.
Well, you can say that's not really Carlisle, that's out in the townships.
And then do you remember taking trips out to Boiling Springs or out to any other areas on Sundays that were special? Going out to Yellow Breeches?
Sunday trips? Not too many, no.
With the 8 children, I guess you didn't.
Huh?
With 8 children, I guess you didn't. Do you remember any stories that were legends that without much foundation that were interesting about Carlisle?
The best legendary story I ever heard was one told by Frederick J. Templeton, who was a very respected old-time lawyer. He was president one year, and there was a woman attorney. Her name was Ida Cost, K-A-S-T, and she was always trying to run the annual bar meeting a little bit on her wishes. she was a total non-drinker. And one year, well, they had a habit in the bar meetings that the incoming president would buy the first drink for all of the other members. And it said that Fred Templeton was up demoting as president, and Miss Ida got up and she moved that the bar no longer have alcoholic drinks before dinner. And there was a stony silence. And he waited for a couple of minutes and finally said, well, now that that motion has met the fate it so richly deserves, we'll move on to something else, which I always thought was great.
That is a good one. Can you think of one more like that?
I wish I could.
We'll pause. It was a wonderful story, George. I'd like to ask you now what you think about the attempts or successes of the Historical Society in starting these walk the walks and preserving the older neighborhoods and taking people on these walk the walk tours every year now to show them how lovely Carlisle is.
I think they're doing a really great job doing that. They're getting Carlisle pointed out to the people in detail, and I think it's wonderful what they're doing. And all of the people who take part in it as
Docents. Docents and guides.
Yes, right.
What do you remember? Do you have anyone in the business community that you remember? Like it would be Mr. Moss, the photographer, and other businessmen here in Carlisle. Do you recall?
Well, I can recall a photographer. I forget his name. Who did you mention?
Moss.
Moss.
Moss. M-O-S-S. He was an African American.
I don't remember him as such. But, well, one of them, as I mentioned before, was the fellow that ran Bowman's store.
Yes.
And
what about the newspapers?
oh, I knew all of the Sentinel folks, the Thompsons.
Were the Thompsons a part of the founding family?
Were they what?
Part of the founding family of the Sentinel?
Oh, I say they were the founding family, indeed.
And when you read the Sentinel now, how do you compare it to what it was, say, 40 years ago? Do we cover much more of the events in and around Carlisle, or do you think it's still a very much a home newspaper?
It's a home newspaper, but I would say it's a good one. I think they do a nice job, frankly. You talk to people and say, oh, that dumb paper or something like that. But I like it. I think they do a good job.
Well, it's had a long history here in Carlisle.
You bet.
It's been here quite a while. Do you remember taking Sunday drives out to Boiling Springs and to the lake as a child?
No. Never did it, I recall.
You don't remember going out to Boiling? Because I always thought that would be a great place to go on a Sunday afternoon for a little ride. But
I don't ever remember taking one there.
Can you think of anything else? What do you think needs to remain the same about Carlisle, and what would your hopes be for Carlisle as a community?
Would you repeat that one, please?
Do you think that Carlisle can remain a small, charming town, or do you think it will develop further into a bigger community?
Well, I don't think it's going to develop too much further because they have certain industries here which have pretty well reached their capacities. And I think it's going to stay relatively the same size. That's my just honest opinion, for which I'm grateful.
Yes. We were talking about how the years go by and we had the mother and father stores, and they were replaced by Woolworths and Pennies, and now we have Woolworths and Pennies replaced by Walmart and possibly Home Depot, and it just seems to be a progression that's inevitable, that the more you stand still, the more change is perceived. Things do change, but rather slowly in a small town. We've noticed that really we only have one old company left, which would be Duttry's, as far as a dress shop, clothing store downtown, Wardecker's. Do you remember Wardecker's?
Oh yeah, you bet. That's an old one.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a beautiful collection of artifacts in there. I hope he'd leave them all to his society or someplace that would preserve them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does. Any other thoughts that have come to mind about the many years you've lived here and raised your family?
No facts. I just have a background feeling that it's a nice place to live.
I think that's a wonderful note to end this session on.